what happened in that conversation with Comey about Michael Flynn. What exactly did President Trump say?
There was no conversation about Michael Flynn.
So you're saying that President Trump and James Comey never discussed Michael Flynn?
That is what he will testify to if he's asked that question.
And you're also saying that a month ago you didn't tell ABC News that he said something along the lines of can you give him a break?
No, I did not. I said that is what Comey says.
Oh, goodness gracious. That was President Trump's lawyer, the one and only Rudy Giuliani, claiming the president never spoke to former FBI Director Jim Comey about Michael Flynn. But just last month, this is how the president's very same attorney described the conversation between Trump and Comey.
The reality is Comey, in some ways, ends up being a good witness for us.
How is he a good witness for the president if he's saying that the president was asking him, directing him, in his words, to let the Michael Flynn investigation go?
He didn't direct him to do that. What he said to him was, can you give him a break?
Comey says he...
I want to bring in Seth Waxman. He's an SEC enforcement attorney and a former federal prosecutor. Okay, Seth, I don't even understand this. Rudy Giuliani directly contradicting himself. Now, one could say he's trying to muddy the waters, but what does this do to the investigation? Are there any consequences for the president or Rudy Giuliani that he's straight up lying either then or now?
Well, I don't think a sitting president's ever going to be indicted, so there may be some ramifications if there are ever impeachment proceedings, and Mr. Giuliani and Mr. Trump were put to the test. But as we also heard Mr. Giuliani saying, he's arguing in the alternative. And to me, he's arguing a reality, a false reality. His statements don't seem to be tied to the law or the facts. He seems to say whatever comes to mind at any given moment that's expedient at that moment. And I can tell you that's very confusing for the American people. I'll just give you a quick example. I had a murder trial once where the defense lawyer stood up all trial and said his client didn't commit the murder. He was across town. He has an alibi. And then in closing arguments, he said, but if he was on the scene and he did shoot the victim, it was self-defense. That's a very confusing thing for a jury to digest. And I, as the prosecutor, stood up and said, look, even the defense lawyer is saying his client was on the scene. So these kinds of arguments routinely fail in the court of law, and I think these will fail in the court of public opinion as well.
But how are they going to play into the investigation? Are they? I mean, Robert Mueller's got to be watching this.
Sure, he's watching it, but I don't know that he really cares about it. He's focusing on his investigation. And, in my opinion, if this ever goes to an impeachment proceeding, Mr. Trump needs to keep 34 Republican senators on his side. It takes 2/3 of the Senate to remove Mr. Trump from office. So I think Mr. Giuliani's strategy, if there is one, is to continue playing to that Republican base. Hopefully that translates in his mind to 34 Republican senators. He continues to poll in that 30 to 40% range. And if he wins that battle, then he walks. Then he remains president, and there's no removal from office.
All right, this morning, Giuliani again spoke about how Mueller needs to wrap up this investigation by September. Listen.
He should put out his report, tell the American people what he has, and they can evaluate it. They're entitled to this information before he shouldn't hold it and try to manipulate the election the way Comey did. I don't think he wants to do that. So why did I say September 1st? Because a long time ago, 2 months ago when we met with him, he threw out September 1st as a date that he might be able to get the report done by.
So let's just remind our audience, Benghazi investigation took over 4 years. Hillary Clinton's email took over 2 years. No indictments. The Mueller investigation, the Mueller probe, at this point, the full list of known indictments and plea deals is 35. What do you think Rudy Giuliani is getting at? And do you believe him when he says at one point Team Mueller said September 1st they'd be ready to go?
I think that's wishful thinking on his part. I would be hesitant to believe that Mr. Mueller would put kind of a marker down like that, knowing how kind of complex investigations take and how long they take. And to your point, other investigations go on very long. This is a fairly short window of time, given the gravity and the complexity of this investigation. And frankly, one of the 2 or 3 big things that I still think needs to happen in this investigation is that the Mueller team needs to take a run at some of the potential key cooperators, people like Paul Manafort. So if that trial were to result in a conviction, they may have a shot at bringing him into the fold and using that as well. So there's going to be a long period of time before this investigation wraps up.
All right, Seth, thanks so much. I'm glad you're here by our side while we're covering it. Coming up, if you've got